All right, guys, so we're gonna re-go over some of these different things that we did over in class. Taking some dynamicness or adding some dynamicity to the split squat, the rear foot elevated split squat, and some of those patterns that we did, right? So when we looked at, our single leg RDL, we're moving, got a little bit of dynamicness there. When we do a split squat, a little less dynamic. But when we start to then go into some of those patterns, right, that RDL is a hinge pattern, the split squat is a squatting pattern, right? We're looking for 90 degrees, the ankle, knee, hip, squat pattern. So when we look at then making them a little bit more dynamic, we're gonna look at 3 different exercises. So the first one, reverse lunge. So you're just starting in a standing position. You're taking one foot and you're just stepping it back all the way down to where that knee touches and coming back up, okay? What you're trying to do here now, depending on what your goal is, if I step back down right here, right, I get 90, 90, 90, right? So I've got all 3 of those buckets kind of checked, or those check marks. From this position, I can just push straight up through the ball of my foot. That's gonna give me a little bit more quad. It's gonna give me some glute as I get my hip extension. The other way I can do this is if I pull myself up to standing. So I'm gonna drag my heel into the ground and pull myself up to standing. So you can do the same thing when we talk about loading strategies. You can go bilateral, so stepping down, dumbbell in each hand. If we wanna then make it a little bit more challenging to the lateral aspect of the hip, we can go single, right? So this hand's free, it doesn't have any weight in it. I got a contralateral load. I can then switch it, same thing. Everything stays up nice and tall, pulling myself up, okay? So that's a reverse lunge. The other way we can do it, right? So reverse lunge is gonna load a little bit more hamstring and glute. When we talk about muscle contractions, you get a little bit more eccentric load, basically the lengthening of the muscle, then the braking forces of the muscle. So then we talk about a forward lunge. So you're just stepping forward into that position, stepping out, catching yourself, the knee touches, you push yourself back up to standing. When we do, doesn't matter which of these movements we do, if I step back, my knee stays in line with my toe. I've got that hip pointed kind of towards my toe here, pulling myself up. If I were to go forward, same thing, knee in line with the toe, pushing back all the way to standing, okay? Same thing, I can load that movement, all right? I can load it bilaterally, push it, right? I can go contralateral, pushing back, ipsilateral, going forward, okay? So that's just one of those things you can do. Now, if you want to change it a little bit, you can then take that motion and you can push all the way past that knee, trying to keep that foot flat. And you get a little bit more knee dominance there, so you're gonna get a little bit more quad involved in that split squat or that lunge, okay? So you can get all the way in, step all the way out, push all the way back, all right? The last of our lunging variations is then lateral. So if I start standing, what we're looking at, there's 2 different ways we can really do this, but stepping out, my toe is gonna face forward. I'm gonna step out this way. Toe is also facing forward, and I'm gonna sink butt back. I'm gonna sink into my hip here, okay? Now notice my knee is still in line with my toe. I'm pushing back to standing, being able to sink all the way down, all the way back up. Now, depending if you have a little bit of a hard time with that, you can actually do this from standing. So almost doing like a lateral split squat. So being able to sink and then push yourself back up, you can definitely do that. Same thing, we can take that loading pattern. We can take those loadings, we can go bilateral. This one gets a little tricky because you got to go outside the leg. Sometimes you can go right inside the leg if you want, depending on your comfortability. Pushing back. You can go ipsilaterally, right? Going to the outside, pushing back. If you want to load it on the inside, that's great, but you get the same effect loading in the opposite hands, contralateral, sinking back. From the side, it looks something like this. So I step out, sinking back in the hip, pushing back, okay? So those are those lunging variations, and if we want to change then those lunging variations, we can elevate a foot. We can take that foot and take like a plate or a little box. Same thing, I can step forward, sink onto it, sink down, so I get a little extra in my hip, push back. If I were to be on the plate itself, I can sink and pull myself up to standing, right? So I'm just elevating that front foot. And then I can do the same thing. I'm just gonna go contralateral load here, step out. I can get a little extra in my hip and elevating that side or that lateral lunge. So when we look at the squatting patterns, ankle, knee, hip, 90 degrees at each, that's our squatting pattern. That's gonna allow us to do squats on a single leg. We can add some more dynamic movement into them by turning them into lunges, okay? So that's what we went over in class. The audio cut out on those, so being able to just understand that's what those are, that's what we went over in class if you weren't there. So be able to know those 3 movements, the different ways you can load it, and how you can change it just a little bit.